9, 8.
You're watching The Experience, Comic Culture and Sales. Streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
2, 1.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to The Experience, the EXP here on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter. I'm half of your co-hosts, actually, Christopher, a.k.a. the Bronze Age Nerd. This week, we're not joined by producer Kyle. He's busy in Baltimore taking care of some important side activities that he participates in. So I was kind of out there trying to figure out what we're going to do for today's show. And the topic of the comic book industry and the health of it came up last week, and it had me thinking about indie creators. So I kind of reached out to some indie creators I knew were out there. And I was absolutely fortunate enough to have a really fantastic gentleman, Jonathan Hedrick, join me tonight for the show so we can talk to him. He's a writer that's famous for his works on books like The Recount. I'm sure you've probably have heard of that. And we're going to talk about some of his other works and talk about his career and talk to him a little bit about being an indie creator in comic books. So I think it's going to be a really fun show. We will be paying attention to everybody in the chat, so make sure you're getting your questions in there, and we'll sprinkle those in throughout the interview. I do ask that you keep in mind that if we're engaged in a conversation, we might not break away right away to ask your question, and we'll star that and we'll come back to it later. So that's just something I ask you to keep in mind. So we're going to introduce the show here in a second, and we'll be right back with our special guest tonight. Stay tuned for the Devil's Advocates here on the EXP. Hey, welcome in, everyone, and I'm going to bring in our guest. Everybody, welcome Jonathan Hedrick. How's it going, Jonathan?
Good. How you doing, Christopher?
Fantastic. It's nice to get a chance to finally sit down and get a meaningful conversation with you instead of just through Facebook Messenger or something.
Right.
I've been looking forward to it for a while. We're honored to have you here, and we do appreciate that. One thing, we'll kind of say hi real fast to some of the people that are awesome and showed up here early in chat. GT Key Comic is always like the first guy at any of these chats. Nice. Always holding it down. We appreciate it. Endurus Collects, John Stout, Kenneth Bird, X11 Bravo. Awesome. I know X11 Bravo is a big fan of yours. We were talking about that earlier.
Good people.
Yeah, great people in chat. So Edward, we got Ed Weird. We got you in here as well. So we definitely want to make sure you guys get your questions in there. So keep those ones handy and in your back pockets. So one thing I like to do when I talk to a comic book creator, everybody that comes from a different background. Some people read big publishers, some people read indies, some people have different genres they like. So I never assume that everybody in our audience watching now and on the rewind will be completely familiar with you. So I like to get to know the guest a little bit. And since you're a comic book creator, I figure you have to be a comic book fan somewhere down the line, or at least have an interest in them. So I'd love to start off by asking you, kind of what your first experiences with comic books were and what your relationship to comic books is today.
Yeah. So the first comic book I can remember picking up was one of the Ninja Turtle adaptations of the cartoon show from the 80s. It was TMNT Adventures, I believe it was called.
Yeah.
Obviously, it wasn't, Eastman and Laird's. I was too young to even find those at the time, but the Spinner Rack comics. I was a big Ninja Turtles fan, as many people are that were born in the 80s like myself, and I had to have everything Turtles. And I remember seeing that Turtles comic book and scooped that one up, and I read that thing back and forth so many times at one single issue. It was such a bizarre issue too. Like Napoleon was in it for some reason.
Oh wow!
I don't even know why, but I remember asking my mom what "sacre bleu" meant. And then shortly after that, it was the adaptation of the movie, the 89-90 live action movie adaptation, which I think it was a thicker, comic because it was adapted the entire movie in one issue. So I think it was probably like 48, 64 pages. And I read that thing back and forth. It was rolled up and stuck in my back pocket everywhere I went.
Nice.
So I think through those comics it introduced me into reading sequential storytelling.
Yeah.
And then came, the Batman, the animated series, Spider-Man on Fox, X-Men on Fox, those cartoon shows that did such a great job adapting the comic books led me back to the comic books. I wanted more of that. I wanted more of, the Phoenix Saga and
Yeah.
more of, the Venom storyline. You got these 30-minute episodes, but there's so much more to chew on via the comics, and that just kind of like branched out into, me diving deeper and deeper into that world. And then, fast forward, as an adult, I segued into, still reading superhero stuff, but was able to appreciate more of the things that I saw on the comic book shelves when I was a kid. But I just knew that they were just beyond, my intellect at the time. Like,
Right.
Sandman, which I grew to love, as an adult. But I knew I wanted to read that, but I just, when I was a kid, I was like, I know I'm not going to get this. It was hard enough reading Chris Claremont's X-Men as a kid.
Yeah.
So, as an adult, your tastes change somewhat, and that led me, the Vertigo books led me into more deeper stuff. I remember hunting for stuff like stray bullets. That was, things that you just couldn't find at sometimes a regular comic book store, the like underground type comic books.
Yeah.
And then about 5 years ago, I decided to dip my toe into the comic book writing world. I had always been a writer to some extent. That's what I excelled best at school. And my teachers
Okay.
told me that, hey, you're good at writing. You should, do something about that. But when you're a kid, no one dreams of being a writer, for the most part.
I did, but I mean, yeah, very few, right? Like it's
Right.
not like it's not an astronaut or a fighter
Exactly.
pilot or something.
It's not rock star. It's
Yeah.
not, an athlete.
Yeah, they want to beat Spider-Man. They don't want to write Spider-Man.
Exactly. So, I always wrote short stories, little, things here and there in composition books that I never planned on showing anybody.
Mhm.
I entered a few contests here and there, short fiction type stuff. Never got anything back, but I about 5 years ago I learned how to self-publish a comic book, and once I knew the ins and outs of that, nothing was stopping me from that point.
Yeah.
I saw this interview with Doug Wagner, great writer, and I asked him, in the chat for that one. I said, how does one get into comic books? And his advice was, just make a comic book. And I was like, whoa, that was such a simple answer, but it was also a loaded answer too. Like, okay, how
Yeah.
do you make a comic book? So I did some research. How do you write a comic book script? Online, look for things. I checked out books in the library and kind of transferred a short story that I felt was strong enough as a one shot into a 24-page comic book script. Then I was like, now what do I do with it? Then, looked into getting an artist. Thankfully, that artist, kind of guided me through the streamlined way of, making a comic book. I'm going to send you 5 pages, and you go take these 5 pages and give it to a colorist. When he gives it back to you, you get a letterer, and then before you know it, you have a comic book. And so that first comic book I fully funded on my own. I didn't know what Kickstarter was. I printed 500 of them, and then I thankfully had several local comic book stores that were willing to, put some on their shelves, let me do some signings. I did a local convention like a week or two later, and things just started taking off. It just kind of just all fell into place magically somehow. And
Wow.
so then I just kept on had more stories to tell.
Yeah. Well, and that's really a cool story, because I'm an aspiring writer. I've always wanted to write. So I'm always fascinated by comic book writers, because obviously, I'm a comic book fan, and I always wondered, like, hey, can I ever rise to that level and take a swipe at that? And so that's a really inspiring story for me to hear. I really appreciate it. I'm sure a lot of people in our audience will resonate with that as well.
Good.
You mentioned, the I'll call it creative writing kind of interest. And you wrote some stories and some treatments. Did you start out in a specific genre? Did you try different genres? Was it just what you were interested in, what you felt you were best at writing? Like, how did that work for you?
Most of my writing leaned toward the horror genre more than anything else, either horror or horror adjacent, like, thriller, crime, darker type storytelling.
Yeah.
I wasn't doing any like, fan fiction, superhero type stuff. I always lean towards, horror more than anything else. And I still do. That's my go-to. That's where, I have a lot of heart in that area more than anything else.
Okay. So as a fan of that particular genre, I have to assume there's probably some influences in the, kind of the prose writing world that you might have had early on. I mean, we could probably guess a couple of those, but I'd still love to hear your answers.
Well, of course, Stephen King,
Yep.
that he's a big one, living legend. I've grew up, watching, the movies, reading the books. Now I've really got into, thank you, Christian. Christian's such
That's
a
awesome.
nice guy. But yeah, Stephen King, I really got into the Dark Tower series about 20 years ago. I was like, where was this all my life?
Same.
Yeah, it's so amazing. And then the comic books were coming out at the same time that, expanded on it so much more. It's such a great, huge story. So, of course, Stephen King, and then, his son Joe Hill does a lot of great work too, prose and comics. Brian Keene is another great horror novelist. So I could read off a lot of them. I was picking up a lot of zombie books too for a long time. I was doing straight zombie prose for a good few years, and some good ones, some bad ones out there.
Right.
Just like anything else, though. But
which one was your favorite zombie book, and why was it World War Z by Max Brooks?
That's such a good one too. I think that was one of the first ones I think I got that one as a white elephant gift, and that one might have been like the one that opened up the can and just the Hellraiser Pandora box, and then it was all zombies after that for a long time. That's a great book. Instruction manual plus some great little stories in the back.
Yeah. Well, I guess I would have preferred to do it the other way around, but I read the Zombie Survival Guide first, which is it's awesome. It's a little dry. Like if you've read World War Z and you read that, I feel like that's a better. It's kind of like reading Lord of the Rings, then wanting to go read the Silmarillion or something like that, right? Yeah. You don't start off with the Silmarillion.
right. There's a reading order, proper reading order.
Awesome. Well, I've got plenty of my own questions, but I definitely want to respect some of the questions coming through the chat. So we are going to dive in, and we might jump back and forth in time a little bit as far as timeline goes and everything. But this is a really cool question. We mentioned X11 Bravo earlier. By the way, folks, if you're not following X11 Bravo over on Instagram, give them a follow. I love working with X11 Bravo. There's a really great organization of veterans there. If a lot of you that watch my stuff, I probably love to support veterans. We got the Heroes for Heroes auction coming up next month on Veterans Day to support Mission 22. All proceeds going to Mission 22. And X11 Bravo has been a very good booster and supporter in that. So I really want to just say thank you for that real quick, X11.
Yeah.
X11 says, one question tonight. What keeps you humble, brother? Unlike some creators, you are friendly, approachable, and humble in your success. David Nakayama and you are like the two nicest guys ever.
Wow.
And he follows it up with, you're an incredible creator. What keeps you humble and keeps it from going to your head?
Well, first of all, I love being in the same sentence as David Nakayama. I had the pleasure of meeting him at MegaCon this past year, and he is a very nice guy.
So nice.
Someone that is like, getting all these Marvel covers left and right. He's very approachable, makes time for people. So, thank you for even including me in the same breath of air as DNA. But I guess what keeps me humble is, I see the opposite of humble out there, and that just disgusts me. So I strive to not to be that way. Speaking of the military, someone when I was in the Army said to me, one of the things that registered the most, that stuck with me the most, someone said, don't live up to the example, set the example. And so that's why I try to do that in everything I do, set the example.
That's awesome.
So, you're always doing the right thing if you are setting the example, not just living up to it. So, yeah, I have my bad days too, just like anyone else. But I just try to stay grounded. It's easier said than done.
No, that's definitely true. And I really appreciate the answer. I think it's a good question too, because you hit the nail on the head when you're talking about, and I'm not the kind of guy who's ever going to name names or whatever, but like there are some people out there that you talk to and it's just like, whoa, okay. Yeah. I didn't realize Diva Complex was a real thing, but it certainly is. Even in the niche hobby like comic books.
There are some prima donnas out there, and there's plenty of great people too to balance it all out. So.
Absolutely. And you also gives us an excellent segue to something I was going to ask about later on too, which is your military service. First of all, I want to thank you for your service.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Is that a topic that you're okay talking about a little bit?
Yes,
or is it
okay? Absolutely. Okay. Yeah.
Cool. So I was curious, I've been getting set up for that charity auction I mentioned and really kind of thinking about Veterans Day coming up and thinking about the significance for a lot of people. As you gave some already, so that's a really good piece of advice, but I'm curious about two parts of your military service specifically. The first, let's ask kind of the more, I guess, potentially fun question. Are there any stories or experiences you had in the service that really have either been adapted or heavily implied to have happened in any of your stories, or any kind of inspirations for your stories?
I'm not sure if anything on the fun side has been adapted or made any influence. But yeah, I had plenty of good times in the service. And I think I know where the second question's going. Is any of some of the more less
Actually, no, I was gonna try to stay away from that. So the second question, before I get to that though, I will just kind of preface that with, I was able to, and unfortunately I didn't read all of it, but I was able to read the first issue of Quicksand. You were generous enough to send over a link for me to preview.
Thank you.
And I just noticed that there's obviously a pretty heavy, for those that haven't read it, a science fiction / military theme that's kind of an invasion story happening there. And I won't spoil too much, but it's a really fun story. And I was, maybe it's because of the art primarily, I was instantly reminded a little bit of, like, say, Starship Troopers, which I obviously, reading the book, seeing the movie, they're very different experiences for those that haven't done it. Same with World War Z, we mentioned earlier, very different experiences. But there is a theme of military and service. And, there's also a little bit of, especially with authority and clashes with authority, there's a bit of that going on in the first issue of Quicksand as somebody's trying to take charge of something. So I just was curious if maybe that kind of is something that, probably not how it played out in Quicksand, but maybe something you'd experienced or something you'd seen in the service.
Yeah, I think it could have happened, subconsciously, got filtered in there during the writing process. I certainly wasn't drawing on anything specific,
Okay.
but I think my experience in the military definitely did assist in, trying to accurately portray how some type of, tension like that scene in Quicksand 1 would have gone down. So
Gotcha.
it was a lot of fun to write too. So
Nice. It was that whole interchange is a fun scene. For sure. Very memorable. It's going to stick with me.
Thank you.
So yeah, to get to the second half of the question, it's actually, and like I said, you gave some good advice earlier, so that might be it. But I was curious, a lot of veterans, it's something I'm thinking about, especially dealing with like Mission 22, for example. They have harder experiences. They have a lot of challenges they face. Do you have any advice for people that have served or that might be exiting the service soon? Anything that you would, any words of inspiration or solid advice you'd want to give for them?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is find your people, and don't be afraid to ask for help, and don't be afraid to take help. A lot, I think it's stereotypical to want to be strong and do things for yourself, but there's a lot of help out there, and a lot of people that want to help you. It's not that they there's nothing demeaning about it. Take that help. You might be helping someone by letting them help you too. So don't think of it as you being selfish or any type of crutch. Take that help. When I got out, I had to go on unemployment right away. And I'm glad I did. Because I was this close to just living off of saltine crackers that I was stealing from Wendy's down the road. So don't get yourself into that rut. Look for the help and ask for it now, not later. Ask for it now. Start getting those, those gears spinning. So yeah, don't be afraid to take help. That's the biggest thing.
Awesome. That's really good advice. I think that could help a lot of people. Thank you. I appreciate you talking about that a little bit.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah. AJ has a really good comment here. Caffeinated Hearts and Hyper Aware are two of the best stories written by indies in many years.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, AJ. That's that means a lot. Those two one-shots are pretty close to my heart. I love both of those stories, and I just feel like they just flew sadly underneath the radar amongst the thousands of great comic books that come out, all the time. There's just not enough shine to share amongst all of them, but thank you. Yeah. Thanks for checking those out, especially Hyperware. That one, Caffeinated Hearts, I was fortunate enough to crowdfund and get published in the same calendar year. Hyperware came out, and that was it. But I'm always happy when people tell me about those. My short little stint with Source Point Press.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Then hey, wow, Triple B had a very good. Every time I tune into the show, I can't turn. Hey, that's high praise for us. We appreciate that.
Great.
And thanks to Jonathan for making this an episode that you don't want to tune out of. That's great.
Yeah, thank you.
You're very welcome, X11. Thank you for all the work you do, man. I appreciate that. More love for Caffeinated Hearts there. That's cool. Yeah, just want to make sure I didn't miss any other good questions. The E4 Mafia is watching. Yeah.
Sham shields.
Cool. All right. Well, folks, if you do have any more questions that you want to throw in there, definitely do that. Those are some really cool comments and questions we love to see. One thing too, we talked about Quicksand a little bit. Before we do a break here in a few minutes, we do play a little ad break here in a few minutes. Are you willing to talk a little bit about because that's kind of what you have coming? Well, it's ongoing right now. You have a new issue coming out here in a few days. Issue number 4, right?
Right. Yep.
Right.
October 18th. Yep.
Cool. Yeah. So that's something that I was kind of curious if you could tell us a little bit about that, since that's your current project.
Yeah, so Quicksand, the 5-issue miniseries. I describe it as a sci-fi horror series. Someone online cleverly called it also eco horror, and I was like, okay, yeah, I can see that. But basically, it's about this hole that opens up near the pyramids of Egypt, and a bunch of monsters come crawling out and attack the city of Giza, and then they run right back into the hole and disappear and never be seen again for a while. Leaders around the world are like, what the hell was that? We can't let that happen again. So they form this team of experts, send them down to that hole to do some recon, and the team never comes back. They never hear from them again. So the wife of the team leader, she shows up about a year later to the military installation that's at the hole, and she's demanding her answers. And she will get them however she has to, including going down into that hole herself. So it's I like to call it grounded sci-fi, because we hear sci-fi and we immediately think, space, Star Wars, Star Trek, but it's it takes place here on Earth. And if you're a fan of like Aliens, James Cameron's Aliens, Stargate, Starship Troopers is a good comparison without Casper Van Dien.
Yeah.
But it's if you like big scary monsters and big guns and it's a lot of fun. It's not meant to be. I think it's smart, but it's not meant to be like blow your mind, change everything you know about storytelling. It's a lot of fun. It's reminds me of those like 90s blockbuster summer movies.
Totally.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. And you said Stargate, and that's immediately my mind went to like those Dean Devlin, Roland Emmerich, movies, the Independence Day, the Aliens, because it's a sci-fi story that kind of hits the ground running on the action, has that kind of cinematic, popcorn theater kind of pace to it in the beginning. Right. And I'm excited to read the rest of it too. Probably get going on the rest of it later tonight, actually.
Awesome.
So yeah, it was a really fun story. Looking forward to finishing that one up. I highly recommend it to anybody out there that is looking for, kind of that new, fresh concept. It's not, something that you've seen a million times before, and it's not a cape book if you're into kind of, looking for some of that sci-fi action. So I think that's a really, really good place to go. Thank you. On that note, before we are going to star your questions that are coming through. I see some good comments coming through. We're going to go ahead and do our first ad break, and we're going to support the sponsors here on the EXP and talk about some of the upcoming shows. And when we come back, we'll have some more questions for Jonathan from you guys in the chat and from your host. Stay tuned. We'll be back in a minute.
According to a statistic that I just made up, people spend 4 hours a day changing the television channel. People who watch The Experience don't do that. Save yourself a ton of time by tuning into The Experience and enjoying our new original programming 7 days a week. And then tell your friends. Think about the money they could save on batteries in the remote alone just by tuning into The Experience. Find out more by scanning the QR code below.
To be continued. 3 little words that hold the secret to the next great story. 3 words that will thrill you, confound you, give life to new possibilities. Every variation of To Be Continued is a promise of adventure, a promise of excitement, a promise of unseen wonders and unexplored worlds, a promise that every issue you read makes you a part of a never-ending journey, and behind every page there will be an unopened door waiting for you. This story to be continued at your local comic book shop. Visit comicshoplocator.com today.
Go follow The Experience on TikTok at @the_EXP1 or scan the QR code on the screen. Our TikTok is like everywhere else we are, except you only have to deal with us for a minute. Seems like a win-win to me.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. We are joined today by our guest, Jonathan Hedrick, if you're just now joining us. And we are going to be talking about some of the questions from the chat. And a little bit later in the show, this is Devil's Advocates. We do like to talk about issues that affect the comic book community, the comic book industry. So we are going to talk a little bit about that a little bit later in the show. Of course, it is fun to get to know our guest a little bit more and ask some of those questions we've been dying to ask. So we'll keep that going as well. Kind of wrapping up some of the talk from Quicksand we had earlier. X11 says, yep, that's real right there. Pushy wives with the right husbands get stuff done in the service. And Triple B saying that you had him at Pyramids, which is definitely one of those things that I think a lot of people will latch on to for sure.
Yes.
And been waiting for and hoping for a hyper-aware screenplay.
Me too.
Okay, that's a question I have to ask because you hear about this a lot with I don't want to just say indie, but it is kind of true of that. A lot of, and it's actually I would say some publishers, let's put it that way, seem to be focusing on sort of concept farming for potential Hollywood deals. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it is definitely something you see a lot of. Is that something that is ever in your mind in the creative process, or is that something that maybe comes later down the road, or how do you approach that?
Well, I try not to go into any new comic book project thinking, how will this make a movie? Because I think you're just you're leaping over way too many stones doing that. Let it be a comic book first, and then if it grows into anything else, hopefully that happens organically. And, I kind of, almost 2 years ago, my book, The Recount, got optioned for a movie. Here we are 2 years ago, and I'm still sitting, in my apartment. I still have a full-time job. Nothing happened after that magic. I had my 15 minutes of fame. I got maybe 10 extra followers on Twitter, and that's about it. So unless the movie actually gets made, and how many indie comic book projects have got that far, other than, the Ninja Turtles and The Walking Dead. Sure, we could probably take some time and name some, but it's not enough. The ratio of comic books to independent comic book based movies is not very balanced. So going into a script thinking, all right, I'm going to write this comic book hoping that it gets made into a movie someday is doing yourself a disservice. So I'll leave it at that. It's cool if it happens, but I want it to breathe as a comic book first.
Totally. And I really appreciate that answer. And I don't necessarily, I don't want to speak ill of writers that are out there doing that, because in fact, I was listening to Bernard Chang talk the other day and saying just for his process, he actually writes everything for his scripts for his comic books as a screenplay, because then once he has the dialogue down, he's able to then translate that into it. So I don't think he's sitting there writing movie screenplays intentionally or teleplays for TV or anything like that. But obviously there's some carryover there with plays and all that kind of stuff too, in the way comic books are written. So I don't want to fault anybody for that, but I think it has become a trend that it's making a lot of comic readers maybe kind of roll their eyes, because they're like, is this just getting out there for a TV deal or something,
right?
Netflix deal or whatever. And with that in mind, have you ever had quick follow-up, have you ever had a publisher reach out to you and try to, you don't have to name names, of course, but maybe come to you and say, hey, could you write us a story on spec to potentially be adapted or something like that? Has that happened?
No, and I wish it would, because that means that's a job for me. I wouldn't turn down that offer, to be honest with you, but I know it. Yeah, I know it's happening out there, and there's hey Travis, that's my guy right there.
Yeah, man, we were hanging out at Rose City Comic Con a couple weeks ago. He's a good dude.
Yes, he is.
Glad you're here, Bueller. We love seeing you in the chat. For everyone who doesn't know, Bueller is Travis, if you're not familiar with that. But Yeah, I love seeing you here, man.
But comic books to movies, it can happen. But
Yeah.
yeah, if someone said, "Hey, we got this movie that's in the works 2 years from now. Can you write a little mini series so we can it timed out for the release?" I want to say no to that. That's a great job right there.
Definitely.
But if someone, I'm not gonna write something and pretend that it's a movie before it already is out.
Yeah.
So.
No, that makes sense. But speaking of the idea of working on, projects, do you have projects that are maybe kind of on the back burner for yourself that you're maybe hoping to do for other publishers, or are you preferring to do the independent stuff that is literally your own idea for your own stuff? In other words, it's a way of asking, do you have a desire to work for Marvel, DC, to do those kinds of stories?
Yeah, I mean, I think any independent writer or creator that says no to that, it might be lying. Or maybe there's some of them that are telling the truth, but it's there's a scene in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back where Ben Affleck is playing himself during they're making the sequel to Good Will Hunting.
Yeah.
And he says, you have to make the big budget studio movie so you can do your passion artsy.
Then you
thing.
do the passion project.
Exactly. Yep. That is the goal, Yeah, it'd be awesome to write Batman and Spider-Man. But there's some cons to that, there's that comes with the risk of being fired at any day.
Yeah.
There's creating all these these characters that you won't own, you won't see a dime of when they put them on the big screen or cartoon or an action figure. But if that leads to after doing a stint at one of those two publishers and then crowdfunding a passion project and all those eyes go that way, then that's what it's all about right there. It's how can I keep the wheels spinning? How can I continue to gain more, grow my circle larger, so I can keep doing what I love? And if that means having to, do projects that are going to get more eyes on you, then so be it. And it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. So, yeah, I would love to do that. I have many little pitches in my head for a few characters, but I know they're not going to give me those first. Might have to do Ambush Bug first or Slapstick first. But I'm like, bring it on. I'll give you best Ambush Bug. If it means I can, write Lobo down the road or something. So it would be a dream come true to do any work in any capacity for those two, and then for that success to segue back into the creator-owned world.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you dropped a couple names in there, and especially one at the end that caught my attention was Lobo.
Yes.
Gotta ask, if an editor-in-chief was to email you tomorrow and say, we really want you on this title, what's the one that would make Jonathan jump around his house and be singing praises? What's the number one?
Oh man, well, I already said Lobo, so I guess a different one.
Well, if that's the one, though, that's good to know.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like there's so much more that can be done with that character. Not that, the other writers and creators that have touched him haven't, done great things. I was talking to Cullen Bunn about his Lobo run at Heroes Con earlier this year. I think that there's the hardcore Lobo fans are not so much of a fan of Cullen's run on Lobo, but I mean, there's so much more story there. And I would love to take a crack at least just a Black Label miniseries or something. Just let me go do something non-continuity related, where I can just destroy and kill as many people as I want with Lobo and some chains and some motorcycle dolphins.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, folks, you heard it here first. Jonathan's going to be writing the main man himself, Lobo. No, I'm pulling for that because I can't wait to see that. I think Lobo is a character that right now there's a lot of us comic fans that we have the James Gunn stuff happening someday, and when that does happen, a lot of us would love to see some Lobo.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, it's overdue. Cool. And then this is a question. I know this is near and dear to X11's heart. I saw one word in this question. I know what it's about. He needs you to be honest with him, not spare his feelings. What are the chances when you get rich after that Lobo run that you'll buy the Shadow, revive him in a violent animated series like the HBO Spawn one?
I mean, if money is no option, then why not? I'm seeing a lot of these. I'm using this term, trying to use this term lightly and respectfully, but your grandfather's comic books seeing a resurgence. Mad Cave announced Dick Tracy recently, and Flash Gordon and Ultraman. So I can totally see it, the Shadow. Especially an animated, darker animated series be great. But they've done some great things recently. I think at Dynamite with the Shadow. I think Steve Orlando did a little bit of Shadow and Batman crossover, which was really cool. So
nice. Well, I mean, we're talking about Shadow, so we know X11's happy. Probably the biggest Shadow fan out there, at least that I know. So there you go, man. We got it. The exclusive someday after that Lobo run. This seems like a great question here. Can you provide any updates on the upcoming project with your wife?
Again, that her, the colorist, and the letterer are all working on the project. We have a tentative deadline of December to turn it into the publisher. So I'm going to ask the publisher soon if we can share the cover before they solicit it in Diamond. So that's the next thing. It's on the plate. So I'm hoping for an announcement soon so we can at least share the cover, maybe a synopsis, the title, and things like that. But I don't want to, step on any toes with the publisher's, plans as well. So
right.
Soon, Marissa.
Okay. Hey, that sounds like a positive update. Bueller wants to know if you're going to MegaCon, or is that
I haven't got my email yet, buddy. So I guess I'm on the waiting list.
Okay.
Well, fingers crossed. 3 years in a row, I've been a guest, and I hope it doesn't. That streak doesn't break in 2024, but February is right around the corner. So I hope they let me know sooner than later. I already got my hotel room booked just in case.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Play it safe, right?
Yeah.
I guess speaking of that, I guess do you have plans to go to New York? Or are you going to be there?
It won't be at New York this year. No, Francesca, my wife, was trying to get in as well with her art studio, but things didn't fall into place. So hopefully next year. We'll see.
Sounds good. And see, I told you we'd make one day for sure. There we go. So that's awesome. And I think it's perfect. We talked about the big two. We talked about those dreams, and I kind of wanted to use that as a springboard to get into a different topic, which is something that, like I mentioned at the top of the show, it's been on my mind, is sort of the state of comics and where we're at right now. And there's some interesting stuff that's happened, and depending on which part of the comics world you're part of, it's either been something that's very much affected you positively or negatively. And I'm curious, as somebody who's had the success in the indie space, how do you view the comics industry and where it's at right now? What's your take on things?
Yeah, I think we're in the a change cycle right now. I'm not sure where exactly it's going, but you can feel that something's changing between COVID and everything else that's happened. Um, Publishers are closing. Comic book stores are closing. Something's going to change but it's going to be for the good no matter where it lands. We're going to always have comic books. It may not be, you might not get your comic book the same way, but we're just in that shift mode right now, and it can be scary. It's scary for creators and collectors and small business owners, but we just have to stick it out and put our best foot forward. So yeah, I think we're all in that learning curve right now, and it's hard when you don't know where the end is going to be. But comic books have been through its fair shares of trials and tribulations. So yeah, I don't want to say it's a sinking ship, but it's definitely a course correction. It is trying to find its way, because we weren't planning on a lot of things that have happened, and we're also behind on a lot of things. We're behind on catching up of the diversity in comic books and things like that. It's been a slow crawl with that. Diversity in creators too,
Yeah.
So it's going to happen, but we talking about not forcing things. It needs to happen organically too. So sometimes these things take a long time, but yeah. As for me, I'm going to keep on doing my thing. Keep my nose clean. Dot my I's, cross my T's. Try to put out a good product. Try to support the fans. Do right by the LCSs. Fulfill my Kickstarters. Things like that.
Cool.
Show up to a signing. Things like that. That's all I can do. And keep on setting that example.
Right. And I'm a huge believer in that too. That's a great point. I always say, a high tide raises all ships especially when it comes to comics and the community we're in, and that any positivity we put out there, and it might not sound like those are, ways to be positive, but again, we talked about it a little bit earlier. You go to cons and you talk to some creators and they're surly, or they don't show up, or they're not at their booth very often, or, they're not hitting those signings that they're canceling at the last minute. And sometimes there's very good reasons for that. Of course, health related reasons, or all kinds of things, of course, not to speak negatively of people that have to cancel for those kinds of reasons, but there are things that leave bad taste in fans' mouths, or they hurt promoters, or they hurt comic shops, and, doing all those things can really make a huge difference. It makes me wonder, you brought up a fantastic point that things need to happen organically to a certain extent. Completely. Great point. Let's flip the script on that though a little bit. Let's say that tomorrow that email doesn't come through. You don't become the writer of Lobo, unfortunately, but you are elected as the czar of comic books for the entire world. Everything's under your control. What's the first thing you think you would do that you think would help improve the comic book industry in any way you want?
Wow. Man, there's so many things. It's hard to think of one. But one thing I would like to see is from a publishing standpoint, less people internally working at the publisher, putting out their stuff through that publisher. I get it. It may look, if you're working at DC and you're an editor at DC, it may look bad if you're writing a comic book at Marvel, but this is comic books. This isn't, us sharing nuclear codes with Russia and stuff like that. So I'd like to see those people that have, their foot inside the board of that publishing company, maybe take a step back from putting out their own comic books at that same house, and make more room for other people to tell their stories. Because I'm trying to dance around saying, favoritism and things like that. But to me, it's where's the challenge in that? Where's the the hard. I'm not saying that their work isn't hard, but go out there and submit to a publisher like everyone else has to do. Get your stuff turned down by another
Yeah.
publisher. That keeps you humble. That keeps you hungry. It keeps you thirsty, and it keeps you remembering the basics. And if you don't forget the basics, you don't have to go back to the basics. So
Yeah.
that's what I would like to see. I like to
Nice.
see, that internal conflict of interest be removed. So, and I say that as a creator who wants that spot.
Yeah.
If it was me, and if I was owned my own publishing company, maybe I would think differently. But I'm seeing it from a different point of view. It's probably what I would change first.
Yeah, no, that's really that's a really good point, and it's something that I think that comics work best as a meritocracy. So,
Mm-hmm.
if people have gotten up to that point where they can kind of go off their name alone, it doesn't mean that they can't deliver quality work and not have it be criticized. So, if you give other people a chance to get in there, it might be nice.
Yep.
100%. I agree. That's a great answer.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, thank you, man. I this is a fun one.
Mm.
So that's our producer Jay using the channel there. Is there a super villain you'd like to tackle? Did you have a quick answer for that one?
Well, I'm gonna twist the answer around, and
Mhm.
and I'm gonna say I would love to create a supervillain that sticks around. I think that that is like a goal from a lot of creators, to have a villain that, like a Batman villain or a Spider-Man villain, that stays, that becomes a staple. Like Bane. Bane wasn't on the '60s television show. He was a character in the '90s. Now he's been in like 2 live action movies.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, one not so good. But that, I think that is would be an ultimate goal, is create a supervillain that becomes like this, comes the next Harley Quinn, the next Punchline. I think that would be awesome to tackle something from the very beginning. Create.
Yeah, that's awesome. I just want to quickly acknowledge a couple comments in here that are about a cause going on right now. X11's thanking Bueller for his work for Jen, which, if you're not familiar with Jen, her name online is Comics Will Break Your Heart.
Yeah, Jen's great.
Yeah. And I had the good fortune to meet her at Rose City Comic Con too. And so, definitely hats off to Bueller for what he did. We just wrapped up a fundraiser on my channel in conjunction with another YouTuber named Big B McFly, where we did a Shazam sketch giveaway for that too. So, cool. Folks, definitely go search for that GoFundMe if you want to support her medical costs as she deals with her fight with cancer. We want to keep Jen reading, which is the name of the campaign, and that is 100% true. We don't want to have to lose somebody in the community like that. So let's support her any way we can. So think that, and yeah, exactly, right back at there, Bueller. And he's got a lot of favors you can call in, including from this guy. He's already volunteering for that. That's awesome.
Why not? Yeah, I'm there for it. Whatever you need.
And then let's see. I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything else. Okay, cool. So, I didn't really ask about it because I'm sure you've answered a million questions about it, but you did mention the Recount earlier. Mm-hmm. Probably the thing that I think most people are familiar with when it comes to your work. Did you have any stories you haven't shared about the Recount yet that you wanted to talk about, or did you want to maybe talk a little bit about the inspiration for it or anything?
Well, the inspiration came back in 2018, 2019, when I kept on seeing people supporting politicians so blatantly, so obvious. Like, when we go to vote, we go into the booth and it's private, and you don't have to declare it out to the public. But it's like people aren't afraid to walk in with like their politicians shirt on and vote, and get into the car with the bumper sticker on the back, and then they pull into their driveway with the sign, and they're just so obviously rooting for this person. And I thought to myself, what if there was consequences to that? What if this person that you voted for and became this total jerk and committed all this crime? What if you were held accountable because you helped put them in that position? And Recount spawned from that what if scenario, which was this like purge, speculative fiction type scenario. So that was the inspiration for it, and it eerily became relevant and came out at a eerie relevant time. And
Definitely.
issue 1 came out like the week after the 2020 election. Issue 2 came out a month after January 6th at the Capitol, and it's like just two the escapism wasn't there. I think for a lot of people that look for comic books as escapism. So
well, it's interesting you say that though, because yes, escapism is definitely something that people go for, but in the narrative about the times aspect, that comics have hit on so many times in the past with things like even Watchmen or The Dark Knight Returns, or all these different kinds of things. There's an element to that as well that I think it obviously resonated with a lot of people. What was it like having lived through being the guy that wrote that and having so many people talk about it and apply it to what's going on? Like, was that surreal, or what did that feel like for you?
Oh yeah, very surreal. I had, I was a fairly comic book creator at the time, and I was getting threats online from people, on both sides of the aisle too, which I was like dumbfounded about. Like, both of you are pointing your finger, saying I'm thinking that either one of you are bad, which is hilarious in a way, because I painfully wrote it to make sure that it wasn't, agenda based. We never said Republican or Democrat. No one was drawn to look like a particular, real life politician. So it was kind of funny, but in a bittersweet way. But it's still, got a lot of eyes. A lot of people resonated with it. The people that were able to see it for what it actually was intended to be, for just entertaining fiction. I got a lot of high praise about it, and it led me to people to read some of my other stuff, which is the ultimate goal.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think it's just an amazing one of those things that just. Yeah, you talk about the timing and just having it come out. It just, it was such an interesting thing. Like sitting on the sidelines and watching it, it was fascinating. So,
strange times back.
Yeah. Oh, and X11 says he's obviously talking about the Dark Knight Bane. Okay, I get it.
Right.
I get it. The first one was awesome. All right. It was maybe a little more comic accurate, I guess, technically in some ways. Although he's a little bit more of a zombie guy too, but still. Speaking of zombies, so we are getting close to pretty much at our time here. But I do definitely want to talk about a story that I really enjoyed reading, and I have to thank you a lot for sharing it with me. You have a short story coming out right before Christmas in an anthology. And that's the Holiday Spirit story.
Right.
Oh man, I have a lot to talk about there, but it's such a short story. I don't want to give too much away or anything. That's something that I'm super excited to see people's reaction to. And I have to ask, I got done reading it and I wanted to know, are you a fan of a show on Netflix called Love, Death and Robots by any chance?
I have not seen it, but I had more than one person point me to that that show and say, you got to watch this show because it's very episodic, right? You know, it's like
it's an anthology. So
Yeah.
so each story is its own thing, but they all have kind of a dark undertone or a subversion of expectations, at least.
Right.
Kind of in that classic Outer Limits, Twilight Zone kind of way, but it's all hard sci-fi or fantasy, right?
Yeah.
So
I'm a fan of those stories. You know, I grew up watching the Twilight Zone reruns, and like that's how I like my writing to be in that type of realm. Yeah, my story in Holiday Spirits called Exit Us is very, you know that very Twilight Zone. You know, punch in the gut at the end.
Yeah.
It takes a hard right turn, you know, at the end to, not what you expect, how it was going to go down. And I like that, you know?
Yeah.
It's a cool way of telling stories, you know, not necessarily a twist like M. Night Shyamalan, but, the misdirection. I really like that in storytelling.
Well, yeah. And I mean, I kind of haven't read short stories in a while, and it really, and I've watched that show, which I hope you get a chance to check out at some point if you can. But the reason I said that, by the way, is just because it felt like it would be an episode, like a good episode of that show.
Okay, cool.
When I was thinking about it, but it really reminded me of things like some of Stephen King's short stories or Kurt Vonnegut's short stories. Some of that stuff that I used to love reading back when I was younger. And I love Christmas. I love the Christmas season. It's fantastic. But I also recognize a lot of people have a really hard time during the holidays, right?
Sure.
And I think this story might be cathartic for a lot of people in some ways. Last year on Christmas Eve, I hosted a stream on my channel to kind of let anybody that wanted to hop on that was having a hard time at Christmas, because I know there's a lot of people that, they don't get the joy that I was getting out of it.
Yeah.
And I got done building my daughter's presents, and I was like, all right, well, I'm ready to go for the morning. Hop on and let's chat,
Yeah.
And I think people that have that kind of feeling might enjoy this story, or even if you just enjoy like a good high concept science fiction story with that subversion of expectations. So
yeah, thank you. Yeah. Like you were saying, it's the misdirection is just a great way of, taking us away from what we expect. I think we all are trained to, understand frameworks of story. Anything that takes us out of that typical cookie cutter storytelling, it can be appreciative of most audiences. So, and it was supposed to be a dark Christmas story, so I wrote a dark Christmas story.
Mission accomplished.
Thank you.
I'm really curious to read the rest of the stories in that collection.
Yeah,
too, but a
lot of good creators involved in that. So I'm glad it's getting like a second life, because it was kickstarted a couple of years ago, and now it's getting a direct to market release through Band of Bards, which is fantastic.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. Well, you know what, we're a little past the time that we talked about having available for today, so I want to be respectful of your time, but man, I could talk to you for a lot longer. I'm really hoping that at some point maybe we get a chance to talk about some of the other topics I wanted to talk to you about.
Definitely.
I'd love to talk to you about your process and the way you work with artists and stuff like that too, because I have a feeling that you're gonna have some good answers for some of those questions at some future point, if you're willing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right on, man. Well, I really appreciate this. Has been a fantastic conversation. I do want to make sure I didn't just real fast. I want to make sure I didn't miss any last second questions that might have came through that, any burning questions. I think we got caught up. Okay, cool. Looks like I got caught up. So yeah, I just really wanted to say thank you so much for coming here and sharing your time with us.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
100%. We did leave links to Jonathan's link tree. If you haven't used a link tree before, it's kind of a nice collection of all the important links for somebody. That's in the description, as well as it's been in the live chat. And then Jonathan's website as well is in the description. So definitely go check out his projects. You can check out Quicksand #4 is coming out here in a little bit. You can get caught up with the story on October 18th. That's coming out. And then the Holiday Spirits we were just talking about will be launching on December 20th. So that's another one you're going to want to check out as well. I can tell you it's a really, really fun story if you're looking for something seasonal and appropriate to read.
Right.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much, Jonathan. Thanks to the chat for being awesome and asking some great questions as well. And we'll catch you all next time. Do stay tuned. Remember to hit the thumbs up. Remember to hit the subscribe button and ring that bell so you can check out all the wonderful shows here on the EXP. And we'll catch you next time. Thanks a lot, Jonathan. Have a great night.
Thanks, guys.
Join the party. Head over to our link tree to find all the links for everywhere the experience is all the time.